these guys are all right on the doorstep, but they've got Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, and Anthony Santander ahead of them. So if you're the Orioles, you're in a great spot.
And let's get right to Ken Rosenthal joining us right now. Let's start with the Ken Rosenthal tour. Ken, where have you been recently and what have you observed? Did you hit camp already this morning?
Yes, I am at the house that Brzezinski built, Minnesota Twins.
No doubt.
And
Fort Misery.
Working on something with the Twins.
Wait, can we see the picture behind you? I want to see the. Can we get a single of? Whose office are you in?
Dustin Morse's, actually.
Oh, is he there?
No, he's not
here
there.
Right now. Oh, I was gonna say, just have him get behind you and just take his shirt off. Scott will get so jealous that he's so much better looking than Scott. Scott won't know what to do with himself.
I don't think Scott's too worried, actually, AJ. I think he's good.
Yeah, I'm definitely good. That is definitely an AJ thing. And I'll remind everyone about one of our first Ken Rosenthal hits that we had on this show, where he told everyone that baseball players recognize everything. If one hair is slightly off, they're all over you about it. So I'd just like to remind everyone that we're now about a year into FT. So let's get into some notes. So I want to start with Corbin Burnes and what you put out there about his upcoming free agent situation and why you think it will be different from what Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery are experiencing right now.
Well, I approached him the other day at Orioles camp because he obviously has the same agent as Snell and Montgomery, Scott Boras. And my initial question was going to be, how concerned are you about the market? And that was the morning Zach Wheeler signed his deal. Zach Wheeler represented by Wasserman, BB Abbott. And I did ask the question to Corbin, even though, of course, the market that day was looking healthy. And he basically answered that he thinks this is kind of an aberration, that the RSN situation with a number of teams has affected things. But the reason I think it will be different for him is because he is an innings guy. And we don't see those very often anymore. And the two innings guys this year, and I mean by innings guy is someone who compiles a lot of innings, pitches 200. Those two guys this year who did that on the market, one was on the market, one was an extension. That's Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. They got paid. Corbin Burnes has been throughout his career that kind of guy since he's been a starter. He's an accomplished pitcher, Cy Young top 10 finisher 4 times, winner once. He's gone 200 plus and then 193 last year in the last 2 seasons. So I expect if he has the normal Corbin Burnes season, he's going to do rather well. And you guys know this as former players. I don't know that players ever worry about what's happening with others in certain circumstances. The great players. He'll look at this Corbin Burnes and say, okay, yeah, Snell and Montgomery, they're struggling, but I'm Corbin Burnes, man. Now, he's not saying that. But that's the mentality the great players have, and usually it's justified.
Ken, do you think this – I know Burnes has Scott Boras. Do you think the way this offseason is played out will make Scott Boras more, fearful of taking guys to free agency and more amicable to signing guys to extensions? Because Wheeler got a huge extension. You don't think it'll change, even though 2 of his biggest assets are still sitting there?
Nope. And I did ask Burnes about why he switched to Boras from CAA about a year ago. And he said because he gets great deals for starting pitchers in free agency. Scherzer, Strasburg, Garrett Cole, 3 great examples. Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery, not great examples. But as I wrote in that column, 6 years ago, or 5 years ago, I should say, the 2018-19 offseason, Boras had this kind of offseason. I don't remember the exact names. Keuchel was one. There were a couple of others that he appeared to miss on. And then I wrote a column at that time saying maybe the market has passed him by, maybe he's not adjusting to shifting trends. Well, what happens the next year? He comes out smoking. It was Cole and Rendon and Strasburg, and he had all these great deals, more than $1 billion total. Next year's Scott Boras class includes Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, Corbin Burnes, most likely Cody Bellinger and Matt Chapman if they opt out, and maybe Snell and Montgomery if they get opt out. So I don't know that he's going to adjust his strategy any. He will probably spin this as what Corbin Burnes said, an example of the RSN situation being problematic, kind of an odd year in general because the Mets, Padres, and Red Sox have not spent to their normal levels. And it's just one of these things in his mind. Now, Scott Boras detractors will tell you this is happening because he wants too much and he's overplayed his hand, and all of these things together can be true. I don't know exactly what happened. I'm not sitting in the middle of the negotiations, but to answer your question, AJ, I don't expect anything to change.
Because he's in it for the long haul. Boras is in it for the long haul, and he's going to get his number. If there's a little blip in the radar, do players see that? Does a player like Corbin Burnes see that as, it's just a blip in the radar? I'm not Jordan Montgomery, and I'm not Blake Snell.
That's exactly, I believe, how he sees it, Eric. He didn't say it in quite those terms, but he did say he thinks it's a blip in the market. Now, the other thing about extensions and Scott Boras that you have to remember, and he'll do them on occasion. Altuve just signed one. But it is rare for him to agree to a big-time extension with a client because his philosophy is get to free agency, get to the open market, have 30 teams bid on you, not one, and have the open market determine your value, not one team. Very often, this works for him. There are occasions, and we're seeing some of them this offseason, where it doesn't work as well. And hey, Matt Chapman turned down $150 million over 10 years from the A's. This was, I believe, entering the 20 season. Now, you can say it was the A's. It wouldn't have worked out. It was a low AAV. All that's true. But $150 million is $150 million. He probably would have gotten traded at some point. And that's almost 3 times what he ultimately got from the Giants. Now, granted, he's made some money in between, so it's not quite the math that I just described. But again, as I said on my show the other day, the way these things are measured is by the size of the guarantee. And by the sizes of the guarantees, Scott Boras can talk about the opt-outs and how they could ultimately benefit the player, and they might. In each case, maybe Bellinger and maybe Chapman get monster deals next year. But for now, you look at the guarantees, and they're not what was projected, what was expected.
In your article, you talked about Chapman's actual value. Is this a case where they got a Gold Glover at a discount in the sense of, kind of break down, if you don't mind, break down the value of how the teams see it? Because it takes 2 to tango, and the other side is the team that's actually paying these players.
What I wrote, Eric, it's kind of complicated, but I'll try to explain it as simply as I can. His 1-year salary, if he opts out, is going to be $20 million. Now, in addition to the $20 million they're paying him, they also lost the draft pick, 51st overall. That pick will have a slot value probably around $1.8 million. Steve Cohen, Mets owner, put out a tweet a few years back saying teams generally value draft picks at 5 times their slot value. So that's 1.8 times 5, $9 million. Add that to the $20 million. Matt Chapman is essentially a $29 million investment if he opts out after 1 year. So you might say, well, that's high for 1 year. But you know what? Matt Chapman has been essentially a 4-win player by WAR the last 3 years. This is more math coming, bear with me. And WAR, each point, teams generally look at it as worth 8 to 10 million. So a 4-win player is worth 32 to 40 million. And yes, if Matt Chapman, the investment amounts to essentially 29, they could be very well getting a bargain if he is that player again.
Ken, we had Sean McAdam on earlier from Boston. He's a beat writer from Boston. And we asked him about your article about Alex Cora. Is this going to be Alex Cora's last year in Boston? And if so, I mean, I read the article, but why? I mean, they seem to like him. They seem to get along. He seems to like it there. He seems to be able to handle the Boston media. Why would you let a guy like that walk?
Why have they conducted themselves the way they have this offseason? I don't know. And they've run themselves curiously. Now, why would you let him walk? AJ, in a situation like this, it seems to me that it has to play out. And we have to see how they perform, whether they overperform, how he gets along with his new chief baseball officer, Craig Breslow. These things are all part of the dynamic. And the other part, perhaps the most important part, is does he want to come back? And remember, Craig Counsell a year ago was in this exact position, entering essentially his walk year as a manager, becoming a free agent at the end of the season. And Counsell played it out. And then Counsell ultimately went to the open market and got a record deal. Alex Cora, if this team plays to, beyond expectations, if they play beyond expectations, and their expectations are rather low right now, If that happens, then in my view, he's going to be viewed as a hot guy. He might even be viewed as that guy anyway, because people in baseball might say, the Red Sox, it's not Cora's fault. Chaim Bloom, the last 2 deadlines were not great. Ownership this offseason, not great. Cora's doing what he can with what he has. And we could have several high-profile jobs open up at the end of the season. Again, depending upon what happens. So he wants to see how this all plays out. The Red Sox want to see how this all plays out. They could extend them right now. Maybe they would in certain circumstances. But with a new chief baseball officer coming off 2 78 and 84 seasons, if I'm the Red Sox, maybe I want to see a little bit more. And if I'm Cora, I want to show the world that I've still got it. That this isn't me that's causing this losing, these problems. That, hey, I can manage and get more out of my team than people expect.
We talk a lot about signings, and as a player, I want players to get big league deals. Eddie Rosario signed today on a minor league deal. I know it's listed as a split contract. It's a minor league deal with a possibility of making $4 million. As somebody, and you said it before, maybe WAR is not the best number. Is this the fallout that we're missing from this offseason? Because there's guys like all the guys you've mentioned. Brandon Belt had a 136 OPS plus. JD Martinez is still out there. Michael Lorenzen. Is Eddie Rosario a fallout of what's left on the market? A minor league deal for a guy who was NLCS MVP and accolades galore and can get hot as anybody?
Eddie Rosario, Gio Urshela, Tim Anderson even. We've seen a number of players have to accept lesser deals because it's late in the offseason. Teams are basically dropping the hammer. Now, I will say this. It pains me to see what is happening with those remaining players. I don't know what they've asked for. I don't know if their expectations were too high. And yet, at the same time, as we go forward here, as we see these players come off the board or not, it does bother me that this is happening. Now, I'll qualify it by saying it happens every year. There are always players weeded out of the system. It's just the natural course of baseball. But with the game skewing ever younger, it seems to be happening maybe even more than it has in the past. I don't have numbers to quantify that. It's just a feeling that I have. And it's 2 things. Again, I don't know what these guys have asked for, and I don't know if they're being, in the eyes of teams, unreasonable or beyond where they should be. And at the same time, it's a situation where this does happen. It's not that unusual to see certain players undervalued in every market. It does happen every year. It's just disturbing to see qualified players. And I'll go through a list. Pham, Duval, Michael A. Taylor, Michael Lorenzen. These guys are all legitimate major leaguers. Brandon Bell, you just mentioned him. And yet they're out there. JD Martinez is another one. They're just waiting. And I don't know that it's going to get any better for any of them. Maybe an injury would help, but I don't know that it's going to change much.
It hurts when I'm watching spring training games. I'm like, that's their starting outfield for certain teams. That's their 4th outfielder. And then we see moves like this. So I'll tie this into the Orioles part of your notes column. Baltimore, I get it. They have a roster crunch with how many talented young players they have. Most of the other teams need to be looking up these players. So what did you think of what Baltimore's got going right now, and obviously the logjam that they have, and them being, in my mind, allowed to not shop in these waters? Just like the Mariners, I would say, are probably the only team that I would go, you know what, they don't need a starter. They're good right now.
Scott, you're absolutely right, first of all, that there are a number of teams that could need or use any number of these players that I just mentioned. Let's face it, these are upgrades over what you have. And if you pay them a little bit more than you maybe want to, well, your team gets better. Hello. As for the Orioles, it's a fascinating camp because they have these infielders just coming out of the woodwork. Actually, not the woodwork. They're all on top 100 prospect lists for the most part. And they're going to have a lot of hard decisions because you have your rookie of the year, Gunnar Henderson. He'll be somewhere on the left side of the infield. You've got the number 1 prospect in the game, Jackson Holliday, who still stands a good chance of opening the season with the club. He's 20 years old. You've got Urias, you've got Mateo, you've got Westberg, And that's not even counting a guy like Kobe Mayo, who tore it up in AA and AAA last year and is barely even in this conversation. Then you move to the outfield. They've got Kjerstad, they've got Colton Cowser, and they've got Kyle Stowers. And these guys are all right on the doorstep, but they've got Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, and Anthony Santander ahead of them. So if you're the Orioles, you're in a great spot. And the only problem that they're going to have is disappointing some of their players. Now, fans might say, well, make a trade. Make another trade. You barely were even dented by the Burnes trade, which is true. But it's harder to make a trade this time of year. We see them, but it's pretty rare we see deals late in spring training or around opening day. Not unprecedented, but my goodness, what team is going to give up another starting pitcher right now? They all need and are hoarding their starting pitchers. So come the deadline, I expect them to be a force again, the Orioles, depending on where they are in the standings.
I feel like if you're super rich in the world and you're interested in buying a franchise, this is a team to target right now. Oh, wait, that's happening. So, hey, that new ownership group has some nice toys to play with. It's going to be a really fun ride for them. You might take over a team and give them a title this or next year. So that would be a nice way to welcome yourself to the city a little bit more with authority. So, Ken, thanks for the time. Great to see you, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Ken Rosenthal, FT Senior Insider.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.